Hi guys, I'm Mike. This is F1 Fanatics, and this is our live race reaction to the last Grand Prix of the season, the 2019 season, and the last Grand Prix of this decade. And it was won by that man, Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. It is almost fitting that the team that have absolutely dominated this past decade and the driver who's dominated the past decade has won the final race of this decade. I think I've said decade enough on that front. So what we will do, guys, in this live race reaction is we will break down the race from 20 to 1, give some general thoughts of the race before obviously giving some thoughts, then getting some questions from you guys and kind of having a discussion there. Hi, Ed. Hi from there. Has anyone seen Kvyat imitate Grosjean? Alex, I have seen that from there. So we'll discuss that when that kind of comes into there. That was very funny, amusing on that aspect. So yes, we'll be giving 20 to 1 rundown, then questions from you guys, and I guess probably a discussion about the 2019 season as a whole as we go on this live stream. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy. So in 20th place, the only driver to not finish the race was Lance Stroll. I'm not sure. I think it was a mechanical failure in the end. Not sure if that was engine related or some other part, but he was forced to retire in the race. Not great for there. Ash comes in. Obviously, Ash from F1 Fanatics as well. He will be talking in the chat if I miss anything from there, stating not the greatest race of the season. It certainly won't go down as a classic, but there certainly was, I think, some exciting moments at the end and some interesting battles and overtaking there. So still plenty of talk about as well. In P19, we have Robert Kubica. Unfortunately, in his last race, it probably looks like in Formula One, he finishes at the back of the field, even behind Pierre Gasly, who got involved in a little bit of trouble at the start. I believe it was with Lance Stroll. Actually, that was probably the cause of Lance Stroll's retirement, the clash with Gasly at the start. Gasly obviously lost his front wing. So yeah, he was in the pits a long time, recovering to P18. And actually, until Carlos Sainz overtook Hulkenberg on the last lap, he was actually going to finish P6 in the championship. So very close from him. But unfortunate really for us that he was involved in that collision at the start, because obviously it would have been great to see him fighting Carlos Sainz for that P6 position on track. George Russell was in P17. Fantastic rookie season for him, considering the car that he's been in. Obviously, out qualifying Kubica the whole time was really good, and George Russell has won the race battle as well. Antonio Giovinazzi 16, the Haas of Grosjean and Magnussen 15th and 14th respectively. Kimi Raikkonen in P13. So the Alfa Haas and Williams really at the back there. Nico Hulkenberg falling on the last lap from being in the World Championship points in 10th place behind his teammate and of course Carlos Sainz at the end there. So he finishes P12. Daniel Ricciardo finishes in P11. Carlos Sainz in P10, securing 6th place in the Drivers' Championship, which is a fantastic achievement from Carlos Sainz. P9 for Daniel Kvyat. Pretty strong race for him. Obviously, him and Sergio Perez starting outside, starting in Q2, having that kind of harder compound tyre on at the beginning of the race really benefited them as they went really long in their first stints and then were able to overtake and get into the points at the end. Lando Norris finished P8. On the last lap, conceded the position to Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez finishing best of the rest today. Fantastic race from him. And in an era of racing that has been dominated by tyre management, he really is a fantastic driver, and it really plays into his hands because it was his tyre management today that secured his position. Alexander Albon getting P6. I'm going to say Alexander Albon was pretty unimpressive for me today. Probably his worst drive in a Red Bull car for date. We'll chat about that later on and get your guys' thoughts on that. Sebastian Vettel, not a great race. Started on the softer compound, was the only one out. The front runners really doing that. Didn't really pay off. Valtteri Bottas, fantastic race coming from the back. And finishing in P4, finishing ahead of Vettel and Albon was very good for Valtteri Bottas there. Charles Leclerc in P3, although that will be provisional because obviously pre-race there was He's been investigated. Actually, that might be announced, although knowing stewards' rate of kind of announcing decisions, it probably won't be announced. But yes, he had a discrepancy in the amount of fuel that Ferrari declared they had before race to what was actually tested, or pre-weekend, to what was actually tested by the FIA over the weekend. So yeah, Charles Leclerc provisionally on the podium, but we're not sure whether that one will last. Max Verstappen in P2, and then an utterly dominant last race of this season by Lewis Hamilton. He will be in with the stewards at Q2. Okay, so in 10 minutes, Charles Leclerc will be in with the stewards. Christian Horner was saying before race, obviously, you know, they have a lot to gain from that decision. But yes, Christian Horner was believing that it's pretty cut and dry. He can't see how Leclerc wouldn't be given a penalty for this situation. But yeah, Hamilton absolutely dominant performance from Mercedes today. They were so quick in that final sector, but yeah, they absolutely dominated the race. And in particular, Lewis Hamilton, the Mercedes was so much quicker than anything else. And if Bottas didn't have that engine penalty, it might have actually been quite an interesting battle between him and Lewis at the top. But yeah, was absolutely fantastic by Lewis, just absolutely dominant. And like I said, almost fitting that he wins the last race of the decade that they've been so dominant in. Thoughts on the race as a whole? Yeah, it's not a classic. It's not going to go down. And for those people who are against Abu Dhabi as a track and against Abu Dhabi as being the season finale, obviously this is going to play into their argument, because it wasn't necessarily a great race. Got exciting towards the end, but as usual, Sky Sports missing the best action in terms of Sergio Perez overtaking Lando Norris, then Carlos Sainz overtaking at that last point. I believe he broke late into turn 8, then out into turn 9, overtaking Nico Hulkenberg. Yeah, not great for him on that front. But yes, shame that they missed that. It did show the reliance on DRS for overtaking. It did, although there were some good overtakings without DRS. Yeah, I think obviously Abu Dhabi is always going to be negatively affected by the fact that if a title isn't going down to the last race, then almost the excitement's gone. It doesn't have the classic track layout of what a Brazil does, which kind of lends itself to good racing with multiple good overtaking zones. But like a lot of tracks on the F1 circuit, it is heavily reliant on DRS, the overtaking zones. And yeah, just there's loads of those high-speed corners where you can only really follow through and can't really get a good overtaking point from there. Standout performers, obviously, Bottas from there. Hamilton, absolutely dominant. Verstappen did the best that he could. Ferraris were kind of, like I said, Alexander Albon for me. Yeah, he wasn't great. I thought that, you know, Vettel had a really poor first pit stop because the Ferraris double stacked on their pit stops for Sebastian Vettel, and he wasn't able to get ahead of him there. Then obviously Vettel pitted again and he was able to overtake Alex Albon. Obviously Bottas coming through the field. Yes, the Mercedes was a far superior car, but yeah, Albon just really all weekend had quite a poor weekend. Like I said, probably his poorest. So he's going to need to up his game. Obviously, I think everyone's been hyping up his performances, but his performances relatively to Gasly, who was terrible, have been good. But in the grand scheme of things, he hasn't been close to Max Verstappen as a whole. So he's going to need to improve that. He's not really expected to, but maybe he's stuck by the limitations of the car that he's in. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that in the comments, guys. The FIA are testing the Ferrari to see what fuel is left in the car, so the decision may be a while. Yeah, no, it probably will be. Thanks for that update, Ash. Lovely touch for Holt to get driver of the day. Yes, I obviously know. I think a lot of people who are involved on F1 Twitter would know that this was something that was spouted, I think even pre-Brazil, that it would be nice to give Nico Hulkenberg driver of the day in his last Grand Prix. And obviously he was able to do that. There was a nice radio message between him and his race engineer. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a nice touch. They had a nice message between them at the end. He obviously will be looking to get back into F1 in 2021. But yes, his season has kind of fizzled out towards the end, unfortunately. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether anyone does take a punt on Nico Hulkenberg going into 2021. But back to the race, Sergio Perez and Lando Norris drove fantastic races. Obviously, Ash said he feels sorry for Lando not getting best of the rest. He had a great drive. I think he did, but I think Sergio Perez's tyre management made it work better. But obviously, Lando was always going to be against it because he had to start on that soft compound. And then obviously, Sergio Perez, the one stop becomes a lot easier for him, and obviously for Kvyat as well, finishing in P9, because they could start on the hard compounds, obviously starting or going out and qualifying in Q2. Superb drive overall from Carlos Sainz, making sure that he had that last real overtaking opportunity, and he took it on Nico Hulkenberg to secure 6th in the Drivers' Championship, which is absolutely superb. Obviously, Alexander and Albon and Gasly have both had half a season in a Red Bull, so that makes it even more impressive an achievement. Obviously, you know, Gasly didn't take full advantage of his Red Bull time there, but yeah, just absolutely superb from Carlos Sainz. Massive congratulations to him, and for me, he's my driver of the season, just in what he's achieved in that McLaren car. But yes, now probably we'll go to some questions. I think that probably rounds up. I mean, I think that probably says a lot about the race that there wasn't anything there. So what do we make about Carlos Sainz as Ed Butler's there? Obviously, I know he's a McLaren fan. What do you make about Carlos Sainz securing 6th in the championship? Do you agree with me that he is the driver of the season? Any questions in relation to Carlos Sainz and his race today? Obviously, McLaren putting him on that 2-stop strategy almost paid against them and made it work very tough at the end. And he didn't have many laps. And obviously, yeah, securing that 10th and final point scoring position on the last lap was pretty impressive. So any questions on that in the comments, guys? Any questions in general from the race to start off with? And then maybe I'll start to go. Do you think Sainz can be world champion? Motorsport Tube. Interesting one. Given the right machinery, considering someone like Nico Rosberg has secured a championship, I think Carlos Sainz is at least as good as a Nico Rosberg. So if Carlos Sainz in the future finds himself in a machinery capable of a world championship and has a team around him like he does at McLaren at the moment, he certainly does have the potential to be world champion. Plus, he's 25 years old. He is still learning. So, yeah, I would say yes to that one. There does appear to be some confusion over the Leclerc situation. Ferrari believe it is a sport directive. Others believe it is technical. This will affect penalties available, won't it? Yes. Obviously, Horner was saying it was technical, which means that it will be disqualification from the race. Sporting directive, I'm not sure what the penalty would be. But I would agree, but I feel it's close between a few drivers, but I agree. Yeah, I think certainly. Obviously, Max Verstappen has had a fantastic season, driving the absolute pants off that Red Bull this season with some absolutely fantastic performances. Obviously, being the 3rd best car on the grid and securing race victories this year is mightily impressive for Max Verstappen. And obviously, you can't overlook the champion himself. Lewis Hamilton has been the most consistent driver on the grid. Yes, he is in the best car, but yeah, I think it has been the largest gap he's had between his teammate ever in an F1 season. And this has been Valtteri Bottas' best season. So yeah, it is crazy from there. Ed Butler, I feel like a 2021 McLaren will have a better season close to Red Bull. The way that their development is going, yes. Obviously, McLaren having that Mercedes engine as well, you'd expect, because there's no kind of changes to the hybrid engine in this new set of 2021 rules, Mercedes will still have the best, or at least be one of the most competitive engines on the grid. With Red Bull, it's still yet to be seen. Obviously, Honda still being unsure of whether they're in. Obviously, they confirmed earlier this week. I said it in the F1 Weekly News show yesterday, so make sure you go and check that out. Yeah, I said obviously they extended their deal, so they're staying in 2021. But yeah, Honda really have to still make some big leaps forward for me to be competing with the Mercedes and Ferrari engine. Who do you want to see win the championship in 2020? Thank you for that question, Haley. For me, Lewis, on his ability, probably deserves to equal the Michael Schumacher record. So it still would be nice to see him do that next year. But I would like to see a Max Verstappen or maybe a Charles Leclerc, one of the new generation, coming and win a championship. And then maybe, as I do have a soft spot for him, and I do think it's hard, and obviously he moved to Ferrari for romantic reasons, if Sebastian Vettel could put together one last fantastic season in a Ferrari car, I think he would be a fantastic winner for the 2020 season. That would be great to see, but I know that may be an unpopular decision with people. I think it will be between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, but it does depend on whether Ferrari can do. Yeah, I'd agree with that, Ashley. But if it's between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, I would say Mercedes all day, because I don't think the Ferrari. There is actually going to be me and Mark did a podcast in our new F1 Worldwide series that's going to be starting on Thursday. We discussed whether Red Bull can challenge for the title next year. So make sure you check that out on Thursday. Certainly go from there. I want Lewis to win 2020 and 2021 to beat Schumacher. For the British fans, I think it would be fantastic. And Lewis has been an absolutely superb champion. I think he has to do it in the next 2 years, because I think otherwise age and obviously the ability of other teams and other drivers will catch up with him. So these next 2 years, it's kind of a small performance. Motorsport Tube, I was a bit disappointed with Albon's performance. If you look at Albon's gap to his teammate, he was about 30 seconds behind Verstappen. Do you think Albon's race was poor? Yeah, I said it earlier on in the live stream. Thank you for that, Motorsport Tube. Yeah, I didn't think Albon had a great race. For me, this was his worst race in Red Bull. And next season, he needs to up his game. I think Albon is a really likable guy, and he's a really nice guy. Sorry. So I think people cut him a lot of slack for that, but he hasn't done anything exceptional in the Red Bull seat yet. He's just achieved the points that he was expected to get, which is 6th, because the Red Bull is the 3rd best car out of the top 3. And he's done that every time. And obviously, you know, with retirements or penalties accordingly, he has finished above his competitors. So he's certainly going to need to step up his game. And he struggled with it all round. Hi, Mark. Mark just joined the chat. I made it. Thank you for joining in there. Was just discussing on Albon's race and not having a great race. So, yeah, what's your guys' take on it? Obviously, Motorsport Tube, you thought he didn't have great race. I didn't realise it was as much as 30 seconds. A gap between Verstappen, but it was somewhere he struggled all weekend. Obviously, he wasn't happy in qualifying. It wasn't a track that he seemed happy with. And yeah, that showed in the race as well. Like I said, with Vettel having that poor pit stop, was it about 6 seconds or 7 seconds? He was stationary for. He had his back rear tyre was kind of stuck. It wasn't getting on because Ferrari's double stacked the first podium. But Albon still wasn't able to get out ahead because Vettel had a good outlap, but yeah, wasn't out there. It wasn't a great race, but it wasn't a bad race. It was just average. Yeah, that's probably a fair shout. But that's about what I'd say. If we were to judge, if I'm kind of being impartial here, obviously Pierre Gasly distorts things because he was so bad in that Red Bull seat that anyone coming in would look good. So Alex Albon has just achieved from there. But if you think about it, both Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon haven't matched the levels of Daniel Ricciardo. But in Alex Albon's favour, it's his rookie season. So he is still learning. He didn't realise he was going to have a seat this year. So yeah, I'm cutting him slack, but he's certainly got to up his performances for next season. How many race wins do you think Hamilton will be pleased with for his career? Good question. What does that currently put him on at the moment? It's in the 80s, isn't it? Is it 85, 86 race wins? Not sure on that. Someone catch me up on that one in the group. We'll go back to on. I prefer Abu Dhabi to be the first race of the season. Yeah, as a spectacle, 84 race wins. Yeah. Well, I think an honest question to that would be any race wins that put him above Michael Schumacher's all-time record. That would be the easy answer to that. How many race wins do you think he'll be pleased with? That would be it for me. So yeah, he's certainly got to achieve those in the next couple of seasons. And with how dominant Mercedes have been, you can't really put it. I would prefer Abu Dhabi to be the first race of the season. Yeah, maybe Abu Dhabi isn't the best place for a season finale. It has all the glitz, it has the glamour, it has the location. I love the kind of Marina Bay location. I love the night race. The cars look great in a night race. It really has that atmosphere. But I think for me, rather than just saying where it would go in the calendar, the question should be more, you've seen all the big runoff areas. Clearly the layout, how it works, doesn't aid itself to good overtaking. The track's wide enough, certainly for doing it. So what they can do is spend a few millions of pounds. I know it sounds stupid suggesting a few millions of pounds, but reconfiguring that circuit and changing the layout of it to aid better racing would be a much better than playing around with where it goes. Obviously, maybe somewhere in midfield, maybe I suppose they like to mix up the night races. Obviously, you have Bahrain, second race of the season, which is a night race. Singapore, which is just past the mid stage of the season. And then obviously Abu Dhabi at the end is a night race. I think they quite like them as spectacles. So that's why I think it's placed where it is in the F1 calendar. But yeah, there's certainly things with races like today, there needs to be changes made to Abu Dhabi, whether that be where it is in the race calendar or whether that is to the actual track layout itself. The actual race was as bad as France, if not worse. Probably fair point, Mark. I think what saved this race at the end was the fact that there was some exciting overtaking, but we missed that action. And there was some good battles within it that I quite enjoyed. But yeah, generally, you could probably go as high as 80% of the race was, really kind of a procession, really. And as soon as you have a track that Mercedes dominated so much and just led from the front and no race competing at the top, it's always going to be boring. You want a good race, kind of a mark of a good race is battles all the way through the field. And we had that in the midfield. We had that at the back of the field again. But unfortunately, we didn't have that at the top. And I think that then always reflects badly on a race. I want Silverstone as the last race. Good track, good fans. Silverstone would be a great last race of the calendar because obviously I think it is still the most highly attended Grand Prix on the F1 circuit. So you certainly would. And Silverstone, for me, always lends itself to good races. So that would be great. The problem is they would then have to change the calendar in terms of they would then have to have, what would you say, the Oceania, Asia part of the circuit first. Then you'd have to go to the more Asia parts, then probably to Americas, and then finish off with the European segment rather than having the European segment in the middle. But I believe a lot of the placement is because obviously weather conditions. Obviously, in the middle part of the season, which is where the F1 European calendar mostly is, that is the summer in most countries. So obviously lends itself to better weather for fans attending because obviously a lot of the grandstands are open and it obviously encourages people to go outside and general admission tickets. It's nicer when obviously it's not pouring down with rain or it's got snow or anything like that. So that's literally, so if obviously it was a Silverstone circuit here, I mean, yeah, I'm in England. It's been raining horribly today, so it probably would have been a wet race. Maybe exciting, but yeah, it certainly might have discouraged things from the European circuit. If you remove the hanging like a cow corner and use the straight, that would create a great overtaking point. Yeah, that certainly would. I'd agree with that, Mark. There are lots of things you can do with that Abu Dhabi circuit. It's certainly not a circuit that has the constraints of like a street circuit like Singapore or Monaco or Sochi, where you kind of know what you're getting. from that. Abu Dhabi is certainly a massive track that can be improved and can be looked at and go, yeah. Hi, Daily Snell. Thank you for coming back in the chat. Nice to see you back from there. But yes, just agreeing that. What do we think on, obviously, Lewis Hamilton's dominant performance? Do you think having a sector that favoured a team as heavily as that Sector 3 favoured Mercedes, I think that's where they were gaining all their advantage. Do you think no track should kind of have that sector? But then you could easily argue that the Ferraris have Sector 2 with the long straights with their engine advantage, which obviously would benefit them as well. It's difficult, but yeah, obviously Mercedes had a massive benefit with their engine and superiority in that final sector. Abu Dhabi out, Hockenheim in. Oh, well, I'm a fan of Hockenheim. Obviously, the weather has affected Hockenheim. I think the old layout of Hockenheim was obviously a better race. But yeah, obviously, Hockenheim over the past couple of years certainly has generated better races than Abu Dhabi. Like I said earlier, I think for me, Abu Dhabi as a race always suffers when there isn't much on the line. Obviously, you saw Carlos Sainz had 6th place on the line. So therefore, it created drama all the way to the last lap, even though we didn't get to see it live with Lewis Hamilton crossing the line. I'm not sure why they didn't just immediately cut to the battle between the Renaults and Carlos Sainz. But yeah, so you saw there was drama there. But obviously, because Lewis had wrapped up the championship in USA, it was always going to be a difficult race for Abu Dhabi to live up to. Obviously, I know Brazil counters that by being a fantastic race that it was last time out. Brazil, for me, is probably the perfect circuit to win the F1 calendar on. Lots of history, classic circuit, lends itself to good racing, even with modern F1. So, yeah, that's probably the most ideal one in that situation. Lewis Hamilton had a great car and kept consistent. Yep, that's all he did. Lewis has done what he has done all year, which is why, for me, he's in with a shout of being driver of the season, because he just gets the job done. He stays out of the drama. He kind of go, no problem, you got to go. Daily Snail, thanks for coming into the chat, and thank you for your input for that. Enjoy that. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Hope you enjoyed the race and enjoy the winter break. Obviously, we'll be coming with lots of content from there. I'd say no to that with the modern layout. The only races that have been good, there are wet races before 2018-19 fans were ripping into it, like Abu Dhabi. See you later, Daily Snail. Yeah, that's I'd agree with that. I think obviously we've had this conversation before, Mark, about Hockenheim. Obviously, the rain has benefited it in the last couple of years. The old layout was very good. Obviously, that section through the forest, but with its shortened circuit, and it's that last corner, which obviously caused a lot of drama in the rain with the drag strip obviously being super slippy and sending drivers off. That is a really difficult car because it's so different to the rest of the track layout. It's a really difficult part of the track to set up your car. So it's a little bit difficult on that one. But there certainly are a lot of great circuits out there that if Abu Dhabi don't step up, go from there. But they've invested a lot of money. Look, money talks in F1, and Abu Dhabi stump up a lot of cash to host the last race of the season. So what's more realistic? Getting Abu Dhabi removed or moved in the calendar to a different place and losing the season finale, or getting the track layout changed? I think the most realistic one for Abu Dhabi is getting the track layout changed on that front. So that would be it for me. Going back to the race, what do we think of Lando Norris's race? Obviously, he fought all the way to the end, losing that best of the rest position on the last lap. Like I said, had the significant disadvantage of starting on the soft tyre. So obviously, he was the first to pit out of that midfield runners battle. And Sergio Perez and Daniel Kvyat were able to go really long on their first stints. What do we think of Lando Norris's there? There are worse races on the calendar than Yas Marina. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I would say Paul Ricard is the worst of it. There doesn't really seem anything in Paul Ricard. There's lots of kind of fast corners or 90-degree corners that, yeah, don't really lend itself to overtaking at all. Just, yeah, weird section of corners that doesn't really lend itself to good racing. So that's probably the worst. But yeah, Yas Marina isn't perfect, but yeah, certainly could be a lot better. But yeah, back to Lando Norris. Any thoughts on Lando Norris being finishing 8th today? Obviously, for me, he is the rookie of this season. George Russell, Giovinazzi had good seasons all round. Alex Albon, solid throughout, considering it's his rookie season and the pressure of dealing with a big team, I thought was very good. But yes, for me, Lando Norris is the rookie of the season. I'm sure me and Ash will discuss this more when we do kind of season ratings for drivers and season reviews coming up in the following weeks. Obviously, close season, lots of time in the winter break, so we'll have lots of content for you guys there. But yeah, your thoughts on that? I think for me, he's just a clear standout. Beating his more experienced teammate in qualifying, 11:10, was pretty impressive from Lando Norris. And obviously, George Russell, it's hard to really bring him in the conversation. What he's achieved within Williams is good, but without being in competitive machinery to fight the rest of the midfield, it's hard to judge. Lando was comfortably ahead of Alex Albon for me. Obviously, Alex Albon's done well, but like I said, he hasn't set the world alight at Red Bull. So that's why he doesn't win it for me. And Giovinazzi, poor first half of the season, but a much better second half to the season. Struggled again today with the Alpha off the pace, but obviously he did very well for that 5th place finish in Brazil 2 weeks ago. So great drive, great person, dare I say, champion in the making. I think out of the rookies, Lando Norris is the most likely to be a champion. Albon and Giovinazzi are the least likely to be champions for me. And George Russell has all the abilities, obviously was very good in GP2. Sorry, not GP2, F2. But yeah, was very good in F2. But he needs to be careful that his reputation doesn't get too damaged by being at an uncompetitive car for too long. So he will be desperately hoping that Williams can at least compete towards the back end of the midfield next season. Sergio Perez, I'm going to put it out there. Sergio Perez, for me, if we look at the season from Spa to Abu Dhabi, Sergio Perez, for me, has been the driver of the second half of the season. Certainly, points finishes in every race except for Singapore, which he retired with an engine failure, which wasn't his fault. Considering that Racing Point was uncompetitive in the first half of the season, it's got a lot better this second half of the season, but his tyre management and his racecraft has been absolutely superb. So for me, Sergio Perez definitely the driver of the second half of the season. Motorsport Tube, Ricciardo has been the most underrated driver of the season for me. I think Ricciardo has had a fantastic season considering it's his first season at Renault. He's come from a top 3 team to a team who are fighting for best of the rest. I think it's harder going from a car which can do so much more to a car that is then limited. Clearly, the limitations of what Renault have had this year. He had Nico Hülkenberg, which I think a lot of people were expecting it to be a really close battle between Nico Hülkenberg and Daniel Ricciardo within the Renault team. But as the season has gone on, Ricciardo has comfortably beaten Hülkenberg, and certainly the second half of the season, for me, Ricciardo has kind of wiped the floor with Hülkenberg, not doing great for his reputation in that second half of the season. I think he has had a very good season. I think a good point to raise Motorsport Tube, certainly on that front. Any out of those 3 drivers we've spoken about there, Lando Norris, Sergio Perez or Daniel Ricciardo, any questions or any thoughts on those from you guys in the comments below? Obviously, they were the ones there. Daniel Kvyat, obviously his best race for a while. He certainly needed that. Obviously, I think Pierre Gasly would have finished the best of the Toro Rossos had he not been involved in that incident with Stroll at the start. Was difficult. But yes, no, a shame on that front for Pierre Gasly not being able to compete for 6th. And actually, I think looking at how Daniel Kvyat and Sergio Perez's race panned out, with obviously being on the harder compound and going deep into the race, I think Pierre Gasly probably would have been favourite to secure P6 in the championship. So unlucky for him there. Daniel Kvyat himself, I think he needed this performance, a kind of strong points finish to finish the season. He certainly will be looking for a big season next year. And like I think I've stated on my thoughts before, he certainly will be looking for a team in the midfield. Motorsport Tube, I still think Kvyat could end up in the Red Bull in 2021 if Albon doesn't perform well next year. I think Kvyat has the ability to, and is a better driver than Albon, certainly at this stage of their careers. But Daniel Kvyat, for me, for whatever reason, Horner and Helmut Marko don't like him. So I don't see a future for Daniel Kvyat at Red Bull for me. It seems strange. Obviously, his emotions got the better of him. I've stated publicly with it before. In his second half of the season, it was a much more reserved. It was a great overtake, actually, on Nico Hülkenberg during the race to make sure that he got into that points position and was running ninth in the race. Important for him not to get hold up there. So, yeah, it could do. It could do, but I would be surprised if Kvyat did end up in the Red Bull seat in 2021. It appears that the Ferrari are arguing that their fuel discrepancy is for operational fuel, i.e. outlap, in-lap, and having enough fuel left if required to be tested at the end. Okay, could you elaborate that a little bit more on that front, Ash, in terms of what that might mean in terms of penalties or what that argument means on that front? I'll just finish off the Kvyat point with Motorsport Tube. Yeah, Kvyat might need to get out of Red Bull program as soon as possible. I think for me, he's going to try and have a really strong performance in the midfield, and he'll be looking at like a Racing Point if Lance Stroll doesn't perform, a Haas if Grosjean or Magnussen are struggling in that performance. There may be an Alfa Romeo to try and, if Kimi Raikkonen retires, to try and maybe be the experienced driver there with a junior in that program to maybe have a future at Ferrari, because obviously he tested for Ferrari in his season out of F1 last year. So yeah, Kvyat certainly will be exploring his options outside of Red Bull, I feel. Mark says, Perez didn't surprise me. He's just doing what he always done. Kvyat looked impressive, but feel apart after the break. Ricciardo surprised even me. Was expecting Nico to be more competitive with him. Yeah, Perez does what he always does, which is competitive. And Perez is in that unfortunate bracket. I think Perez is a driver who doesn't have the ability to compete with the Lewis Hamiltons, the Sebastian Vettels, the Max Verstappens of the world. But he's too quick. He's a better driver. If you put in the same machinery, I think he's probably a better driver than the Valtteri Bottas, the Alexander Albons, and he's not a better driver than Kimi Raikkonen. Yeah, I think he's just too quick to be in number two in a big team. So therefore, he gets a situation where he's at Racing Point, where I think it's probably where Nico Hülkenberg fell into that bracket. Although I would say, like we did in our recent driver rivalry series, with Hülkenberg versus Perez, I think Perez is a better driver than Hülkenberg. It's certainly for this era of racing where tyre management's important. So, yeah, not surprising there. Kvyat's been a lot more impressive this year. Obviously, the highlight of his year was that podium at Hockenheim. Was an absolutely superb drive. But, yeah, this was a good way to finish his season. And, yeah, Ricciardo has, I think, surprised a lot of people with how he has beaten Hülkenberg, especially in the second half of the season. Going back to that Ferrari point, if successful, it would mean that neither a sporting or technical directive would have been breached, so there will be no penalty. Okay, interesting one on that front. So Charles Leclerc may still yet keep his podium for this season and would be a fantastic end from there. Ed Butler, rest in peace, Hülkenberg. I think it is for me. I wish him all the success in other series, and I actually think he will be a very good racing driver in other series, whether he goes to Formula E, DTM there, although he said that those things don't interest him, and he's certainly going to be trying and pushing for a seat in 2021 by being around the paddock. But yeah, he certainly is going from there. Perhaps Hulkenberg peaked in 2018 and now he's slowing down a bit in F1. I mean, yeah, realistically, you look at Sebastian Vettel, he's 33, Hulkenberg's 32, 33, isn't he? So, he's at that stage of his career where he's more in a decline. Although you argue, though, that Lewis Hamilton is arguably getting better and better as the season goes on in terms of his racecraft and management from there. Archie Hedges, hi Archie. Thanks for coming involved in the chat. So yeah, Hulkenberg probably is peaked. He probably is on the decline, and that's why teams probably are taking the bet on going for younger drivers. The only one was Grosjean, probably in the Haas seat, but Haas are a different team because they don't run like a normal race team, because they buy their parts in. Grosjean's used to working in that environment, plus he is a very quick driver and he has been integral into sourcing solutions within that team, although it may not be obvious within that as well. This is no insult to him. He's a Bottas. He's a second driver to a top team. Is that in regards to Sergio Perez, Mark? Archie Hedges, do you think Formula E is better than Formula One? If so, why? Interesting one. We might do a video on this dedicating thing. Good question, Archie. I think Formula One is still the pinnacle of motorsport and still the best. Formula E, it would be naive to think that Formula E is better than Formula One because it's only been going, this is only its 6th season. I think Formula E in its own class is a very interesting bracket. It has the gimmicky thing of fan boost. I'm not a fan of, because sport should never be a popularity contest. And when Stoffel Van Dorm seems to win the fan boost every week, that doesn't seem great from there. I think Formula E could be a very good motorsport series. It still needs to tweak. The attack mode, although a gimmick, I am quite a fan of. They probably need to find a way of pit stops becoming a thing in Formula E, just to add a little bit of drama on that front. And they need to make themselves the street circuit-based series. It's a very interesting series, very competitive grids. Obviously, I just watched, it was last weekend, the opening rounds in Saudi Arabia. It was a great race. The first race was actually a pretty good race. Sam Bird making his way through the field, British driver from there. If you're a British fan, then I think Formula E is great, because I think there's about 5 or 6 British drivers in there that you can back. And obviously you had 2 British winners in Sam Bird and Alex Sims. But for me, Formula One is still better because, it's just, it has the best drivers. I love the deeper meaning of things. Obviously, a lot of racing series try to make it just about the driver. I like Formula One because there is that engineering brilliance as well. There's a whole load. Yes, the driver is the tip of that iceberg, and the main part of it you see, and obviously you see the pit crew as well, but there is so much work that goes in behind the scenes that's kind of beneath the water on that iceberg. I love kind of how they push things and you see them get the advantage of car. I think if 2021 can find a way of making those initiatives like smaller percentages in terms of time gained, so we have a closer field, I think that would be better. So for me, Formula One is still better than Formula E. I hope that answers your question, Archie. It still flabbergasts me, though, that Hulkenberg didn't get the Haas driver over Grosjean or Magnussen, to be honest. I actually like Haas quite a lot. From an outside perspective, I think you can agree. Hulkenberg is a consistent midfield performer. You can tell in all the midfield teams he's been in, he's consistently scored points and done well in the championship. And he brings stability to the team. You know what you're going to get with Nico Hulkenberg. Kevin Magnussen, for me, I think he is quite a good driver. He's certainly more elbows out than Nico Hulkenberg, so therefore has more risk attached to him from there. And a lot of people are anti-Grosjean. For me, I think Grosjean is a quicker driver than Nico Hulkenberg, and has proven over the course of his career that when there is an opportunity for his team to secure a kind of outstanding position in a league, either that be a podium or forget, Grosjean does actually still to this day have the best position that Haas have ever secured as a team in terms of a 4th place finish. I believe that came last year. And obviously he's been with them since their introduction. There's a lot of loyalty in that fact to Roman Grosjean. So yes, Nico Hulkenberg from outside might see it a nice fit, but I think Grosjean does a lot of things behind the scenes in that team that doesn't get reported in the media. And I do feel there's a bit of a media kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of an anti-Grosjean type of I don't know what I'm trying to say there. Anti-Grosjean kind of storyline they're trying to follow there. I think Grosjean's a lot better than what people give him credit for. Yes, obviously he's made mistakes. Yes, he's not as reliable in stability as Nico Hulkenberg, but I think he does a lot from Haas, and I think we could see quite a decent season from Roman Grosjean next year. Mark said Haas wanted stability and Hulk wanted more money and is known to be critical to teams that something Haas hates. Haas wants stability though, which I can understand. With Hulkenberg, I say he peaked because he went nowhere. He had no need to improve or strive to be better. If drivers don't move or have a teammate push them, they grow stagnant. I would say that he's moved because obviously he's been at Sauber. He had 2 stints at then Force India. He was at Williams. He moved to Renault as obviously hoping that they would be a team that would be on the rise and he would capitalise on that. Interesting on Hulkenberg. I think he's just stagnated because it's hard when you don't. He probably lost confidence in himself when you don't secure the podium finishes or when the top chances don't come. I believe he probably has lost a bit of confidence in himself to achieve those and became happy in terms of being a points finisher because that's what people were happy with him for doing. And unfortunately, there's nothing that Nico Hulkenberg does on a racing track that isn't replaceable by any young driver coming through with the talent that we've got in F2 and F3 coming through. And obviously, Alexander Albon, Lando Norris, George Russell and Giovinazzi have proven all very exciting and good talents coming through. With age on their side, unfortunately, Hulkenberg has probably just reached the age where teams don't want to take a punt on him anymore. Kubica better than Hamilton, changed my mind. Pre-crash, that's a really interesting conversation to have, Ed. Because obviously Kubica was an absolutely superb driver, and I think it's easily forgotten. And obviously, for a lot of younger generation F1 fans who don't remember him driving in Formula One pre his rally car accident, they forget how good a driver that Robert Kubica actually was. So yeah, it's a real shame. This season's obviously tainted that by being in such a terrible car. I think Hamilton's still better. It's the much as what you can do. It's all drivers at that level have some sort of ability, but it's the ability to close out the titles and close out the championships, make the right career decisions and make the right career choices that Hamilton has done, has gone from there. Obviously, a lot of Kubica's thing is out of his hands. It's an interesting one. Pre-accident, who would be better? Thoughts on Ferrari's performance today? Was a bit mediocre for me. Ferrari was a bit meh. It wasn't terrible performance, but they were off the pace. Leclerc was off the pace of the top 2. Vettel was on the wrong strategy compared to the top teams. Being on that soft tyre was never going to work out well for him. But managing to take Alexander Albon at the end was pretty impressive overtake for him. So that was good. But yeah, Ferrari's was a bit of a flat end to the season. They would have wanted to be having a strong end to the season. But yeah, it certainly wasn't a strong end on that front. I can see why Haas, going back to Roman Grosjean, Hulkenberg Haas, Viandra, have I said that right? Please say if I've got that wrong. Thanks for coming in the chat as well. I can see why Haas wants Rogro to stay, even though I don't agree with it. I mean, I know Hulkenberg has a lot of supporters out there, And a lot of people are disappointed that he doesn't have the hard seat. But I think you have to understand that Roman Grosjean does have ability and does have a lot of positives for keeping in that seat. I actually thought Grosjean was going to be a pretty good driver after his second half of 2013 season. Yeah, I think a lot of people did. He certainly showed a lot of potential. And for me, Grosjean and Hulkenberg are very similar. Obviously, Grosjean, I think, was in a better car than Hulkenberg's been in his career in terms of that Lotus car was very good. That Lotus Renault car, between 2012 and 2014, it was a pretty good car, the Lotus Renault. And he certainly showed there. But they're both drivers who could have achieved a lot more in Formula One, but have failed really to live up to expectation on that front. Ed Butler, Russell better than Vettel. I mean, you are loving putting these controversial ones out there. Currently, no chance. Sebastian Vettel is a 4-time world champion, one of the best drivers on the grid still. I know that I know he's taken a lot of flack on his reputation recently. He's still a very good driver, and in a team that is solely behind him and builds a car that is solely around him, Sebastian Vettel would still be challenging Lewis Hamilton for titles, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. Doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's just on that front. Ed's just flying there. Norris better than Mick Schumacher. I agree with Norris is better than Mick Schumacher. I can agree with that one. 2014 Lotus is terrible. Yeah, especially that horrible nose. Yeah, agree. That was when it went wrong, actually, wasn't it? Kimi Raikkonen moved to Ferrari in 2014 and went from there. Ferrari have had a bit of a poor season. Yeah, I think Ferrari just went completely the wrong direction with their car in terms of that low drag setup. Matteo Binotto is an engine man himself, so I don't know if it was Italians are very proud people, whether it was a pride thing. He wanted to show off the ability of the Ferrari engine, which I think we can say the Ferrari in terms of power output is certainly the best engine of the season. But yeah, certainly in terms of aero package, Ferrari got it all wrong. And for me, I know Charles Leclerc has had a fantastic first season at Ferrari, but they got it wrong promoting Charles Leclerc. Now, that's a funny thing to say, considering that obviously he's done well. He's secured their first win since 2010 at Monza. It seems a strange thing to say that Ferrari got it wrong promoting Leclerc, but I just think in terms of team dynamic, nobody expected Leclerc to be as good as what he's been this season. But by having two alpha drivers in the team, combined with not having the best car in the grid, it was a recipe for disaster. They were going to take points off each other. And yet it hasn't been a great season for there. Grosjean and Maldonado 2014 and 15 in the Lotus. Oh my God, yeah. How did I forget that, Motorsport Tube? How did we forget that? Maldonado. God, he was one of a kind. But also, Maldonado, last race winner for Williams, so I suppose I can't be too critical than him. Well, that would be one way to sell more road cards, wouldn't it? What was that in relation to? Ferrari, Ash, on that one? Ferrari need downforce for next year. I mean, if Ferrari have a car that has more downforce setup and they put all their eggs behind Sebastian Vettel, I think he will compete with Lewis Hamilton for the title next year. Charles Leclerc still has a lot to learn. Vettel is still the better driver, in my opinion, out of the two, but Leclerc has had the better season than Sebastian Vettel. Sebastian Vettel's had an average season on his front. Ferrari strategy calls have been awful this year. Yeah, Ferrari do need a new team strategy. Thanks for that, Katie, on that front. Leandro 160, that is an understatement. They need a lot more. Yeah, they do need a lot more. Stroll better than Perez. Changed my mind. Sorry. I'm joking to all the Racing Point fanboys. Stroll is only 20 years old. He has a lot of time to improve. His race pace is very good. His qualifying is poor, although I think he actually had a good qualifying this time out. And that's where he hurts. If you poorly qualify on a Saturday, it always is going to affect your race. So like if Lewis Hamilton was consistently qualifying 5th or 6th, it was always going to be more difficult for him to secure race wins, even in a good car. So Lance Stroll suffers from that a bit. So he's always playing catch up. Ed's gone off on one here. He is flying off the rails. Also get rid of that horrible strategist. Yeah, I think Ferrari could do a lot better in terms of strategist. You gotta judge him on those decisions. And again, they've got it wrong in terms of Vettel's tyre decision. That didn't work, and it cost him in terms of competing for Charles Leclerc for a podium position. But I don't know if that was tactical within the team, that Charles Leclerc was the only one who could get 3rd place in the championship over Max Verstappen. So maybe they internally sabotaged Sebastian Vettel's weekend on that front. Yeah, I know, Katie. He's been mean to my Arsenal. I don't know what the Arsenal result is. It was 2-2 last I saw. So, yeah, there we go. 2-2 full time. Brilliant. On that front. Sorry, wrong live chat. No problem at all, Ed. Archie Hedges, on a Sunday, they aren't that far apart. Yeah, I'd agree with that one, Mark. Don't do us like that, Ed Butler. Right, any more questions in the chat? We've been going for almost a good hour here. Any more questions on the race? Anything more to think about? An if, but a maybe. Do you think if Pierre Gasly hadn't had the contact at the start, he would have secured 6th in the Drivers' Championship over Carlos Sainz, considering that obviously Perez and Kvyat showed that starting in Q2 was more beneficial in this race? I would probably agree with that one, Ash, on that front, in terms of mixing football and Formula One there. But yeah, Gasly, any thoughts on Gasly? Any thoughts on Gasly as a whole, how he's come back this season? Obviously, been absolutely superb to pick himself up, coming at Toro Rosso. And for me, again, he probably, with Sergio Perez, has been the driver of the second half of the season for me. Superb, his points finished. Yeah, both teams in red. Both teams who have underachieved or at least struggling for the time being on that front. But yeah, any more questions in relation to the race today? I think we've covered a lot. We covered Abu Dhabi. We've covered the strong midfield. Obviously, Hamilton's performance was strong. Max Verstappen, there wasn't really anything to talk about because he was just in a race of his own. He has that weird lag with the Honda engine and his accelerator that he was complaining about. Shout out to Jane Charlie on PSN. Yep, I'll give a shout out to you there, Archie Hedges. Thanks for that one. Not sure who he is, but I presume maybe F1 gamer or something on that. But yes. But yeah, guys, I'll give a last kind of round off before the hour. If you want to, guys, have any more questions. If not, I think we'll round off our live reaction. Thank you for all the guys in the comments as well. Will Williams make a comeback? Unless they secure major funding, not for the next 5 years. Because they are so far behind at the moment. And Nicholas Latifi isn't a great signing. Hulkenberg would have been a great driver for Williams if they could secure him. But yes, is Leclerc still under investigation? I believe so. Oh, cheers for the subscription, Archie. Really appreciate that. Thanks for the support. With Gasly, his driving style is so different to Max that he struggled in the car and made him look so much worse than he actually is. I'd agree with that. I think Pierre Gasly is a better driver than Alex Albon. I mean, obviously from seeing there, but overall, if you put Alex Albon and Gasly in the same machinery with cars matched to their individual abilities, Gasly would be the better driver. It'd be interesting to see how Gasly's career pans out. Only had 104 days to fill before the start of first practice. Thanks for figuring that out, Ash. Obviously, you know, we've got pre-season testing in there as well that we can cover in February, so we don't have to wait too long on that front. Katie with, I do think Gasly would have pinched 6th place in the championship today had that incident not happened at the start. He had 3 choice of tyres at the start, and given recent performances, I think 6th was his. Probably, yeah, 6th in the championship. Oh, sorry, knocking the charger over. 6th in the championship. I think it certainly would have been his. Would have been. I think the tyre strategy would have worked out in his favour, with Carlos Sainz only just getting in, and obviously Gasly was ahead of Kvyat pre-accident. So yes, I think probably on that front, Gasly would have secured it. There we go. 80 days to winter testing, not too long there. Can Toro Rosso be a top team? For me, unless they cut ties and say, I know Marcus thought this, he'll probably mention something in the chat there. If Toro Rosso get bought out as a Honda team and become a Honda Works team, yes, they can be a top team. With the level of investment that Honda would probably be willing to invest if they became a Works team again. Can Toro Rosso be a top team? Well, obviously they're going to be AlphaTauri now next season. No, just because of how they are linked to Red Bull, they will always be lower on that aspect, and their budget will always be affected on that front. Obviously, Renault securing P5 in the Constructors' Championship as well today. Why are you more excited than Australia? I'm not sure why you're more excited for pre-season testing. I suppose pre-season testing is that first look of all the cars in their new liveries. Oh, who's excited for McLaren's new livery? Obviously, they are British-American Tobacco Company. They renewed their sponsor with. Say that what you feel morally in terms of obviously F1 teams supporting smoking brands. Obviously, Mission Winnow is Ferrari's version of that on their car. That's Marlboro's race term, isn't it? I think it is. The Marlboro's cigarettes. That's who they have their kind of race brand with. So they still think, obviously, you don't see that classic, iconic bit of branding on a side of Ferrari anymore. But yeah, it's first chance to look at that in pre-season testing. First look at there, see if there's any underdogs. So yeah, I suppose there's a lot of hype around pre-season testing. But no, for me, it's got to be Australia. Australia's got to be an exciting race for us to look out for. Oh, Mark, Australia's not. I quite like Australia. I like Australia as a season opener. I think Australia suffers what Abu Dhabi does in terms of it. It has too many of these fast winding corners that are really difficult to overtake on, and obviously that's more difficult than Yas Marina to change, because obviously Melbourne's a lot more restricted than on that front. So yeah, I prefer Ferrari not to have the Mission Winnow sponsor, as they just can't win every time the sponsor is in the car. yeah, fair. Fair enough on that front. Fair enough indeed. Any other questions? Otherwise, we might think of rounding off this live stream and you having on. And we'll be obviously back tomorrow with driver ratings. And Tuesday, we'll have the last full race review podcast of the 2019 season. Wednesday will be Fancy Weekly. And then, like I said, that new series, F1 Worldwide, where we get fans on from across the world to talk on the podcast. So if you are a fan who's interested on coming on to a podcast, obviously DM me on Twitter in terms of we can have a conversation in terms of planning that. Is a new series we'll be running, and hopefully it'll pick up thing. Or we'll pick a topic and we'll discuss F1 and release it on the channel. So hopefully Red Bull to beat Ferrari and Mercedes next year. Unlikely, Ed, but it has the possibility of happening. Obviously, Max Verstappen there. As a constructor, no. As a driver in Max Verstappen, potentially, yes. No problem at all. Archie, thanks for being involved in the comments, and thanks for your questions in the live stream. There could be better tracks, not Mount Panorama. No, indeed. Right. guys, I think that is it involved in the questions. Thank you so much for being involved in the questions. Hope you enjoyed the race. Like I said, not a classic, but obviously there are still some points. Congratulations to Lewis Hamilton on another fantastic season, another fantastic season for Mercedes. Congratulations to McLaren for being best of the rest, and obviously Carlos Sainz securing 6th in the championship. And yeah, that I think is probably it on do that. Ed, well, message me on Twitter. It's at F1 Fanatics. DM me on there, and we can discuss that further if you want to be involved in that from that front. But yeah, guys, thanks for Ed in the comments. Thanks for Mark. Thanks Ash, obviously. Thanks Archie. Thanks Viandra. Thanks Katie. Thanks Motorsport Tube. Who else was involved in the comments? I think that was the main guys from there. But yeah, thank you for all your stuff being involved in the comments, making this live stream kind of more entertaining, enjoyable, full in the race. But yeah, guys, thanks for that. That is F1. That is the last race live reaction of F1 2019. We will be back for another race live reaction, obviously, when we're back in 2020 with the Australian GP. Guys, cannot wait for it there. Excited to kind of be back, but lots of winter content coming out from us. Starting off with, obviously, driver ratings coming out tomorrow at 6 p.m. UK time. So make sure you tune in to watch that. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.